Welcome to my Saturday live stream, and today I have a special guest, Eric Jennings, and some of you may be familiar with him, some of you maybe not be, but excuse me. The reason I have Eric on today is I needed to kind of catch him in a window when he was shooting Micro Four Thirds because he um, he switches camera systems. I feel like every month. This week it's Fuji, next week it's Leica, then now he's back to Micro Four Thirds, and he's actually someone I wanted to have on my channel a long time because I found his content on his YouTube channel very relatable. He's a self-processed gas or gearholic where he just gets a bug to get something else and he buys it. So he's been through a lot of camera systems, and I felt like uh, this would be a good time to talk about, for those of you that might be considering Olympus OM systems cameras or switching camera systems possibly to something else, you know, doesn't make sense because uh, Eric has been through this many times himself, and he's an enthusiast, experienced photographer. He has done some professional work, but for the most part, he does photography for fun. And I think you'll like him as much as I do, or like his channel as much as I do. And that's why I wanted to bring him in, introduce him, share his story about his gas, and also talk about Olympus camera systems, what the pros and cons are, what he really likes about it, what he doesn't like, and also address some questions from the audience. So we'll do that towards the end. But for now, let me bring Eric in without further ado. And hopefully we see him. Hey, Eric.
Hey, how's it going, Rob? Thanks for having me on the channel, first of all. Second, I think you gave me too much credit. I change more frequently than once a month, probably every couple of weeks.
Wow.
And somebody once told me that, or told me recently that I'm on your channel, which is Micro Four Thirds royalty. So I appreciate you having me on.
Sure. No, well, that's very kind. I try. I love Micro Four Thirds systems personally, and it's my system of choice for just about everything. And I thought it was a very interesting dilemma that you brought up in your last video, and that's really why I wanted to bring you on, because I think a lot of people are kind of in the same situation or have these same thoughts and feelings that you do. And the three things, and I'll just read them off here. Is oh, I didn't write it down. I wrote something else down. Well, basically, one was, you kind of missed that shallow depth of field for wide angle, right?
Yep,
You were shooting maybe 28 millimeters at 1.4, and you kind of
correct.
missed that on full frame terms. So that'd be like a 14 1.4, which just doesn't exist in Micro Four Thirds world. And then the other thing was the autofocus tracking,
Yep.
right? You've always, you're starting to get into birding and wildlife and sports action type photography. It's always kind of been on your plate, but uh, the autofocus in the past has never been great for that. We're not known for sports action photography until the OM1 came out.
Right.
Uh, and we'll talk about that. And then also, what was the lens choices, right?
Yeah,
You
I was
have
talking kind of about the super zooms, but the price points and that kind of stuff versus like a Sony or a Nikon offering.
Right, right. So you right now in your Micro Four Thirds system, you have the OM5. Well, tell me what you have exactly.
Yeah, good luck keeping up. So right now I have the EM1 Mark III. I bought that refurbished. Olympus had the refurbished
Yeah,
clearance sale just recently, and so I had the OM5, and I decent camera. We could talk about that, but getting the EM1 Mark III for cheaper than the OM5 retails for new, I thought was the way to go. From a lens perspective, I have the 9mm 1.7. I have the 20mm Olympus 1.4. I have the Lumix 12 to 35 f2.8 version 2, the 45 1.8 Olympus lens, the 300 f4, the 1.4 teleconverter, and then some third-party stuff that have been sent to me for review. And I'm going to be picking up a GX85 probably during this live stream. So that'll
yeah.
be coming for a travel camera, and we'll talk about that on my channel in the future.
Okay. Wow. Is that the one with the grip, or is that the more rangefinder style? I
That's the
can't remember.
rangefinder one. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I've had that one. We can talk about that. But anyhow, your gap is between 45 millimeters and 300 millimeters, right?
Correct. Yep.
and that's what you were trying to fill. So I watched that video and I responded with, the going wide with a shallower depth of field. Really, you really need to give that up. It's not going to happen. But on the other side, on the flip side, it'll. I think you need to learn how to embrace the composition, right? That background into your composition. Because, like I was saying in the response was, you look at any great work from any photographer, and depth of field was not an issue at all. It was just non-existent almost in a lot of well-known work. Uh, and that's something I think you can embrace and enjoy. I mean, we all love that shallow depth of field sometimes, right? But
Yep.
ultimately in photography, when you start to take good pictures, that is like a one-trick pony, really, right? So tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, so if you grab something like a Q2, whatever it might be, with a 28 1.7, or maybe you put something like a 35 1.4 on a full frame setup, that wide plus shallow look I think is cool. Typically, you can kind of get the subject to pop a little bit and separate, and then you still get a little context in the background. But to your point, I mean, I think sometimes the temptation is, especially on full frame or even medium format systems, if you're shooting a fast piece of glass, is to always shoot that piece of glass fast. And
Yeah.
if I look through a lot of my old pictures, right, I've got piles of them sitting over here off camera here. Some of my best pictures have more context, and just annihilating somebody from the background and not being able to tell where they are doesn't tell the story. But the trade-off of that is that you have to be more aware of your composition. You have to kind of know, what are you including
Right.
in the background and what are you not. And I think I do like that look, that wide shell look. I will never not like that look, but I think sometimes it's a crutch as well. So just trying to mentally get past that mentality and think more like a street photography shooter, where they shoot a lot of at f8, f11, right? Because they're being quick, and they're trying
Yeah.
to maybe include layers in their frame or something like that.
Yeah, and so you don't even have to go outside of your own portfolio to find images that you think are better, right? Without that look, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I do that quite often. I'll go through, I have a hard drive with all my stuff is saved, and I'll go back and I'll go, that was a great shot. And I'll have forgotten which of the million cameras I've shot it on. And it'll be
Yeah.
shot on some Micro Four Thirds camera, or maybe like a Ricoh GR or something like that. But typically it's not related to shallow depth of field by itself.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that yeah, I just kind of let go of a long time ago. And if I want shallow depth of field, I'm going to take the 45-1.8, which you have. Which kind of brings me to the gap question in terms of your focal lengths. You were pondering what, the 12 to 100? Why don't you tell me what you were thinking about in between 45 and 300?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the 45 to 300. So the things I do, I'm looking for. I have kids, so I shoot their sports, and a lot of times the sports are indoors under poor lighting, and they're moving kind of quick. There's a lot of background. You kind of want to separate them a little bit, and so one of the challenges on Micro Four Thirds is to do that. And kind of what the conclusion I've come to is that you need to shoot something like the 75-1.8 or the 42.5 or 45 1.2 or whatever. And but being limited to just a single prime in that situation is obviously very limiting, right? So something like the 40 to 150, I think f2.8 Pro is something people often suggest. But if you stop and take yourself out of the Micro Four Thirds ecosystem, something like a 70 to 200 on a full frame setup, or something like an 85 1.4, kind of gives you more of that look. And so, relating back to gas, that's another one of those triggers, if you will, that kind of gets me thinking of, why am I going to go spend, I don't know, $1,500 or whatever it is on a 40 to 150 f2.8 Micro Four Thirds? Why not go spend, maybe even half of that on something that might give me the look I'm looking for on another system? And so that's one of the setups, or one of the issues I'm having. But
Mhm.
way outside of that, I think constantly switching systems, like I always do, lends to other challenges and problems. And you eventually come back to Micro Four Thirds, or at least I do, because of its size. And we can talk about that in maybe another topic on this live stream. But chasing just that one scenario and kind of forgetting about the benefits of the rest of the system is something I always struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, because like for example, that uh you can get a full frame body for 1,000 to 1,500 brand new. You can get a lens on top of that, 70 to 200, 100 to 400 for about, between 800 and 1,000 more.
Correct. Yep.
And you're in a system that will give you that look for that particular type of scenario. But then, we're talking honking size lenses, right? And, the
Yeah,
the trade-offs for larger systems may or may not be acceptable just for that one. Like I said, I like to think of it as a one-trick pony just to kinda get that one thing. When honestly, I've used that 40 to 150 kit lens, the f4 to f5.6
it's cheap.
professionally.
Yeah, it's good too.
Uh and it's really good, and I don't see a need to get personally, because depending what you use it for, but the 40 to 150 f2.8, is 10 times more expensive just to get maybe an extra stop or a stop and a half.
Right.
Uh, you know, I don't need the critical sharpness and speed of autofocus that that lens would offer, because yeah, you're getting your money's worth in my opinion on that lens if you need those kind of shots or that kind of
Exactly.
performance. I should say. But uh, I think software like DxO, has mitigated a lot of the need to have the faster or lower ISOs, I should say. And the depth of field is not bad at f4 when you're talking about 100 plus millimeters, because the other lens you had mentioned in your video was 12 to 100. And, I think I know you. I was
You're
like,
absolute your comment was spot on with that one. That f4 on micro four thirds under 100 millimeters. You're right. That's not going to do it for me.
yeah, you're gonna be frustrated with more images because you'll be
Hmm.
like, well, I got a 45 prime here. Why do I have my 12 to 100 on? You know?
Well, there's
Uh,
two parts to that too. I mean, first of all, I'm mostly a prime shooter, so I put a prime lens on my camera. I think in that field of view, and so that's something personal. But the second thing is, and it relates to the question you asked. One of the biggest things I think people go when they buy these systems and they watch YouTube videos and find out what the best is of that or whatever. And I think, in my opinion, anyways, for someone like myself, the most beneficial thing is, are you going to carry it with you? And the biggest prohibitor to that is size. And so for me,
yeah,
slapping one of these 1.8 smaller primes on something like an EM5, OM5, or whatever, I'm going to make more images, better images with that setup than I would something that's more expensive, just because it's going to be with me and I'll be there for more shots. And candidly, I had Leica for a while. That was my attraction to Leica. The turn off on the Leica setup is that chasing kids around with manual focus is always a struggle. So,
yeah, yeah. That's not a that's not really to me a family sports action camera, right?
right.
Uh, but yeah, so my recommendation was that, and then maybe pick up that rumored 50 to 250. Have you heard about that lens or seen rumors for that lens?
I have, and I'm trying to catch to see if the influencers already have like Jimmy Chang, for example, Micro Four Thirds guy. He posted some kind of cryptic message yesterday, I think, on his Instagram, and I didn't know if he was talking about that lens. He said, "Be tuned, something big is coming," and I put 50 to 240 or whatever that lens is, and he goes, "Oh, rumors?" Question mark. So I don't know if he's got it or if he's aware of it, or maybe he's
Hmm,
just playing into my gas. He knows who I
interesting.
am.
Interesting. I've noticed his channel, just to go off to another channel, he's been a little more flexible with cameras in terms of brands he's showing on there, but
Yeah,
uh, which is cool. But yeah, what do you think of, would a 50 to 250 f4 make sense for you?
I think so for a lot of the outdoor stuff. I think I'd still probably want a faster piece of glass for indoor sport stuff. Something like a 1.8. But there's two
Mm,
different sides of it. Like, I'm going to be going to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan here next week, and when you're shooting in the middle of the day and it's more about landscapes and that kind of stuff, four is great, and Olympus really shines there because, at wide open, their lenses are awesome. And so
yeah.
you don't need to be shooting at 1.8 for landscapes or whatever it might be. At least in my opinion, I know some people disagree with that, but so I think for that use case, yes. Indoor hockey rink, like my son chasing them around, I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe.
Okay, so f4 is still not quite there for what you were thinking about versus an f2.8 70 to 200.
Well, don't they already have the 40 to 150 f4 that came out as the sister lens for the
Yeah,
2.8?
yeah, they do. And like I
So
said, for me, it just didn't make sense to spend that much more to gain a stop. I mean, I get it. It's gonna be have faster autofocus motors and be sharper, less flare, but
right,
it didn't make sense to me when to everybody out there, that 40 to 150 kit lens is amazing. Uh,
yeah.
and that's why I suggested it for you, just to kinda get your feet wet in that focal length for Micro Four Thirds. No
Hmm.
harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, it's cheap too. So,
$99.
yep.
Uh, so that would probably be a good place to start while you contemplate, "Okay, I'm at F4, F5, would F28 make sense? Because Panasonic has that 35 to 100 F28,
Yes.
um, and that would complement your 12 to 35 nicely, I think. But that's
So
more of a
yeah,
portrait event lens, isn't it?
it is. So here's what I've decided to do. I already made a decision. A lot of times the
Oh,
videos are post mortem of a decision I've already made. If people are like, how'd you switch so fast? I've already typically made the decision, or I've had some like down some path. So I decided not to abandon ship. I'm still with Micro Four Thirds, so this is still
okay.
relevant. But like I said, that GX85 is coming, and it was that deal they have, on B&H or whatever. It's got the 12 to 32 little pancake lens, and then a 45 to 150, similar to that, the plastic
Oh,
fantastic Olympus lens that comes with it. So I'm going to do
right.
that, and the reason why is I've had that GX85 in the past, and I had the 20 millimeter 1.7 bolted to it, and I took it on a vacation, and there's probably 2 vacations I've been on where I've truly, I mean, just enjoyed photography. It was out of the way, but it was with me all the time. And one of them was that GX85 with the 20 millimeter on it because it was small, compact, capable. It looked good. Obviously, you're not going to do any sports or birds or wildlife with it. And the other one was when I had my Olympus, or I'm sorry, my Leica with the 50 millimeter glue to it. And so what I'm kind of finding is I like the smaller, more rangefinder bodies. Just bolt 1 or 2 primes on there as my kind of kit, and kind of
Mhm.
that simplicity is where I seem to be make some of the best images and enjoy the photography experience amongst vacation and other things I might be doing.
Yeah, yeah, and that 12 to 32 is really a very sharp lens,
Mhm.
that little kit lens. I really liked it. The GX85, I wasn't a big fan of. I think it's really well built.
Yep,
Um, but and the menu systems in Panasonic I found very intuitive. I was able to
yep.
jump right in and do everything I need. Whereas Olympus, there's a learning curve for me. Maybe not
Yeah,
for
you gotta remember,
everyone. Some people.
you're like, what does a square with the heartbeat mean? Or what is it? The old menu system, it's like you need a
Yeah,
decoder ring, and then when you figure it out, it's not bad. But at first, you're like, what is this?
exactly. But and the Panasonic is fully touchscreen, which I didn't embrace, but I can appreciate, touchscreen through the menu system.
Right.
Uh, but I ended up selling mine. I traded it in because this is the other thing I wanted to talk about was I traded in my GX85 and a bunch of other lenses and film camera bodies that I paid nothing for, but got like $300 when trade. It's shocking. Film cameras have gone up so much, but I
Yeah.
got the 300 millimeter f4 Pro. I ended up out of
Mhm.
pocket $800
Wow.
for for maybe putting. I spent maybe less than $500 on everything I traded. So I came
Incredible.
out way ahead on that. Uh, but you really seem to like that 300 f4. What are your impressions of it, and how's it working out for you?
Yeah, so just again a little bit of look behind the scenes. So I went to they had an Olympus event at my local camera store, and so they had people in there. They were doing photo walks and all kinds of stuff to kind of promote it. And so I went in there to check some things out, and they had additional discounts that they were offering for that weekend only. And I went in there, and I still had some L mount stuff, right? I had a SL2S, I had a Lumix S5, and I still had some L mount glass. And I went into the camera store, and I really was going to be, another impulsive gas moment looking at maybe the S5 Mark II or whatever, and then they have the what is it, Sigma 150 to 600 or
Right.
whatever, or even the Sony that 200 to 600, that whole setup. And the guy gave me the 100 400 Olympus lens. I've had that lens in the past. I think it's good, but it's okay. Then he gave me the 300 f4, and I would say, I haven't shot all the lenses for Micro Four Thirds, but for ones I've shot, I think that 300 f4 is top notch. It sits by itself. It's incredibly sharp. I like the way it
Yeah.
renders. It truly is a special lens,
Yeah, I
and
think
so I
it's
I, I stay with it.
yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. That lens, I really now this is a little bit different approach, but I didn't feel worthy of that lens until I got the OM1. Like my birding skill set was just not there. Uh,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
OM1 just kind of eliminated that. And that was your other issue was,
Yes.
you know, y- you're not getting the autofocusing system that you can in other systems, save for the OM1. But if you're going to drop 2 grand,
Correct.
and make that up on the lens side, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because that 300 f4 costs about as much as, like, say, a $2,000 full frame plus a 600 millimeter lens of some type, right?
Yeah, if you're sitting down and looking at I want to get into birding and wildlife, and you don't have anything, and you look at the OM1 plus the 300 f4 and any maybe teleconverters you have, and then you look at something like maybe an A7 IV or Nikon Z or whatever it might be, plus a lens, they're both not too far off in cost. And I think you have to pause for a second, think about what ecosystem do I want to be in long term. But the other piece of it was, and if you go back to that video where I talked to, there's a video I posted maybe last week or a week and a half ago, where I was out walking around and it was like a GoPro
Mhm.
vlog, but I was taking some wildlife photos. In that video, I put a picture up, and I had the EM1 Mark III with the 300 mounted to it next to that full frame setup I was talking about, and it's, I would say 40% smaller. And you can't, like, again, back to my previous comment, I think that's one of the biggest prohibitors to using your gear is size. The fact that I could clip the 300 f4 with the 1.4 teleconverter on my capture clip on my backpack and walk around is awesome. And when I
Yeah.
picked up that 150 to 600 plus full frame setup, I was like, I'm never going to use this. This is going to sit on the shelf except for the couple times a year that I bring it out. And so for that reason alone, that's going to be the use case. It's not worth it to switch.
Yeah, and it's definitely there's some one of the things I see a lot of when I go out to, like, Conowingo Dam or, these places that are known for birding is these guys are out there with their heavy gear, with the heavy gimbals and tripods, and they get beautiful shots, but that's just not how I want to shoot, right? I want
Hmm.
to be able to, like you were saying, just put it in my little, messenger bag, go out and whip it out, and I'm good to go, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm
that's
getting
another thing.
shots. Yeah,
I can do it held handheld. The IS sync between the body and the lens is incredible. So,
yeah, yeah, it's definitely amazing, and but what I suggested to you in my response to that video was, you need to up your skill set, uh, before considering another camera system because,
mhm,
the best birders out there, they don't need the fancy subject detect AF. They just need, a little 9 group or 5-point focus point, and they just track by eye.
mhm,
And I found myself, even with the bird detect, you still have to track by eye quite a bit and develop that coordination because
mhm.
the bird's moving in and out of frame so fast that bird detect is almost useless. You need to be able to track the bird, and then once it's in the frame, then the
Yes.
bird detect comes in really nice, especially when they're going back and forth. But if you up your skill set to where you can track in a 9-point, right,
Yep.
and follow that bird and continuous autofocus, like the Matthew Gasquet over at Mirrorless Lessons has an excellent video on how to do birding with the M1 Mark III. Have you seen that video or?
I have not. I need to go watch it. And you brought up an interesting point. The one drawback of the 3.5-4, to go back on that, is that you're constantly at that set focal length. And so, I can see a bird going across a lake, but then pulling the camera and lens up to my face and finding it in the viewfinder can be
Yeah,
difficult at first. And then I have tried that method you talked about, right? I've set up one of my custom menus on my Olympus to be for a kind of birding or action wildlife. And put it in that grouping if you want. And what I've noticed is that if the bird or the animal is not obstructed by anything and it's kind of the foreground, then it does a good enough job. Like, I'm pretty much happy with it. It's when there's any kind of confusing stuff that's in the frame that it gets thrown off a little bit. But
yeah.
I put it on high burst, and let's say I fire off 20 shots, probably 15 of them are in focus. So to your point, the technique is important. I need to keep working on that.
Yeah, and you're gonna need that, like I said, regardless of camera system,
Mhm.
to
Right.
get the best out of it. Because no matter how much the OM1 is helping me, and it definitely makes a difference, uh, if I up my skill set, it's not gonna matter which camera system I use, right? I'm gonna get great results consistently, and, but, that's kinda the autofocusing system that's bird detect is kinda cheating, really, is how I feel.
Yeah.
Uh,
I would say the only thing that'd be interesting with the bird detect, and you've used the OM1 in this way, I have not, is that if a bird, you did get it, is it smart enough to kind of focus it on the eye or the head
if it's
versus
close
maybe?
enough, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's close enough. It'll lock onto the eye and, give you that shot. When they're less than 10% or 20% of the frame,
Hmm.
Your depth of field is enough that it's not that big a deal, but
Right, right.
yeah, when it matters, yeah, it does definitely lock on, and I've had really good luck with it. Uh, just across all my images, shots that I would never be able to get before. Partially because I probably didn't try as hard with the with the M1s when I had them,
Hmm.
and I only had the 75 to 300, so I just felt like, you know, buying a 300 f4, yeah, it'd be great, but I'm still gonna get crap because you always hear the mantra, right? Buying better gear is not gonna make you a better photographer,
Hmm.
and, that's why I held off on the 300 f4 until I got to M1, and I'm like, "Man, if I can do this with 75 to 300, I can do this with a 300 f4 and be at, like, half the ISO,"
Yeah.
you know?
Well, you said gear doesn't make you a better photographer, but you did just say that you never got the shots you did until you got the OM1. So I don't know. It sounds like
Well,
maybe.
it's cheating. It
Okay.
really is. If I was a better photographer, the OM1 wouldn't made as much of an impact, right?
Yep.
For that
Understood.
one thing. For everything else, it's pretty much the same, but the bird detect, and that's the only one I've used, is pretty amazing. It's really good at catching the bird in the frame, but that skill set of being able to get it in the frame, like you said, when you're at 300 millimeters, picking up the camera and be able to get the bird in the frame right away
It's
is
hard.
definitely takes some practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see.
Um,
I'll see. We'll see if it goes on sale and if I decide to make an upgrade down the road at some point or not. But for now, I'm not going to do it because the bird photography stuff is a small fraction of what I do on a day in, day out.
right, right. Um, so I think let me ask you, because in the past you've had a lot of cameras that
Hmm.
are on my short list of things that I'd like to have one day. Like you've had the Leica M10 with the 50 Summicron, right?
Correct. Yep.
And and then you've totally ditched Fuji. I was really surprised. I thought Fuji would have been the perfect system for you. So can you expand on particularly the Fuji system? Because you had the XE4, which is like the GX85.
Yeah.
So
You're starting to
expand
notice
on
a
that a
trend,
little.
right? I kind of go gravitate towards two different kinds of cameras. Um, I I guess are you asking why I ditched Fuji or like my feedback on systems or what I guess what's the
Yeah,
question?
well, what I'd like to know is tell me what you think about the Fuji system and
Yep.
what gravitated it to you, and then why ultimately you ditched it.
The Fuji. So I break it. If I was going to be a professional photographer and just for work and just need to get stuff done, I think something like Canon or Sony or even Nikon would be the way I go, right? Just because I think that they have the most capable autofocus and the Sony system is totally flushed out. But the reality is those feels like computers in my hands. I just, I'm not. Hopefully, nobody's getting mad that's real brand loyal to those over there in the chat, but they feel like computers. They don't do anything for me. However, on the flip side of things, like Fuji and Olympus for me are kind of my passion cameras, if you will. They're built well, the ergonomics are great on them, or they offer something like an analog experience that others don't. And so you asked about the Fuji system. Fuji and Olympus are like my one and two. I had the XH2S, which I think was a big leap forward for them. They did a really good job on updating the autofocus. That stack sensor, did a really good job. And then I've had some of their smaller stuff. Um,
Mhm.
I think it comes down to cost and stuff sometimes. Uh, you
Mm,
know, $2,600 for the XH2S, and then if you get into like an X100V, wherever they come up with next and stuff like that. And I had these moments of like, there's a gas cycle. I had a video on it a long time ago where I'm like, why do I have $8,000 of gas or camera gear sitting in front of me? This is stupid. I can make good images with a fraction of this. And so I
right.
move on. The other side of it is, again, a little bit controversial, is that I do like Fuji for their straight out of camera colors and some of their profiles. But I think when it comes to like editing and stuff like that, I find the files a bit more difficult to work with. So
Mm,
if the comment section isn't imploding now, then maybe they will after that comment. But I really like the way Olympus files look. I like their colors a lot. I feel they edit nicer within Capture One or Lightroom, whatever you use. And there's good bang for buck there, right? I mean, you got good stabilization. You got some of those software features like Live Time, Live Composite, Starry Sky, all
yeah.
that stuff, which I've started to play with more. And so it just kind of introduced a bit more of a fun factor for me. The other thing is when it comes to Fuji, my interest really is more on their analog experience cameras like the X-T5, the X100 series, and the X Pro series. Those are the three cameras I really care about. It seems like they've made a conscious decision to focus more on their XH series. And so to me, those XH cameras almost feel a bit more like the Sony and Nikon that I talked about.
Mm.
And the X-T5 is a good camera, for sure, but I felt like, the X-T3 was the X-T3, maybe X-T4 was the last kind of analog experience camera that had that build I liked. Um, so yeah, I think Fuji's good. I feel I like what Fuji was about maybe a generation ago. I'm curious to see, they have an
Mhm.
event coming up September. I'm curious what they do if they come out with an X Pro 4 or if they come out with an X100. That the X Pro 4 will probably be a big gas trigger for me for sure. I like that setup a lot. It's almost like a Leica-ish type of feel. It's a rangefinder. It's
Yeah.
got an OVF. I
Have
like
you had an
OVFs.
X Pro in the past?
Yeah, X Pro 2, X Pro 3, 2 or 3 times.
Oh.
The X Pro 3, I couldn't get past the screen. The novelty of it, it's cool and all, but I constantly have to go into the menus to change things sometimes, and so I eventually ditched the X Pro 3. But,
Mm.
yeah, Fuji's a really good system, and I think their autofocus got there with the XH2S. And obviously, they
Mhm.
have a good birding lens too. I think they have a 150 to 600 they came out with. That was a good lens. So you could go that route
So it's
too.
more subjective reason why you kinda just let it
Yeah.
go.
If you're looking for, like, a logical answer there, I mean, I don't think a lot of my gas purchases are logical, so I try to make them logical,
No.
but I don't think they
No,
are.
no. I get it, and that's part of the reason I love Olympus is it's very subjective. I just like how they look and feel.
Mhm.
Like you said, the way the colors look when the images come out and they're editable. So everything is, it just connects with me, right? The Olympus system, and it did. I was almost a Fuji shooter, and I'll talk about this maybe in another stream, but my first Micro Four Thirds camera was EM10 Mark II,
Mhm.
and I bought that because I was a D750 shooter with the 150 to 600. I had the whole, and I just, I'm tired of hiking and camping with this,
Yep.
30-liter backpack. I said, I just want a pocket camera. And they had the EM10 Mark II and the Fuji X-T10 right next to each other.
Yeah.
And it was almost a coin cost, you know? But then I looked at the Olympus and I said, this is a better looking camera. So I went totally on aesthetics. I knew nothing about Micro Four Thirds. I was familiar with APS-C because I've had shot with that, but I was like, Micro Four Thirds is even smaller, but that was irrelevant to me. I wanted a smaller camera.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
just, I accepted that it'd be a smaller sensor. But then after I shot with it, I ended up using it professionally, and for everything personal. So,
That
uh,
that's actually how this gas thing started. This whole channel was born off of an Olympus camera. I was kind of into the
mm,
whole Casey Neistat and the vlogging thing that was way back in the day, and I was taking video of my
yeah.
my family and stuff. Remember all that? And so back then, people were shooting with, Canon 80Ds and 6D Mark IIs and the bigger DSLRs, but you had to have a flip screen, and they weren't stabilized or whatever. And so I went on this mission to start and try to find something that was lighter, that had a flip screen, mic input, and had stabilization. And of course, I ended up stumbling upon the EM5 Mark II, which is still
Mhm.
probably one of my favorite cameras to date. It's the metal
Yes.
build and all that stuff. It didn't do good for video autofocus, but then that's kind of where it started, because I'm like, this is a cool camera. I love the colors out of it. It's got everything I want. It's got all these advanced features. And then I got into the whole gas headspace where it's like, yeah, but you're not shooting at, 20 millimeters 1.8. You're shooting at something else. And then went back and forth. And that's where I found your channel. I started
Mhm.
investigating a bit on that. And so that's kind of how I got into Micro Four Thirds. And I think one of the videos I made that kind of got my channel up a little bit was Four Thirds can kill full frame if, right? And I was
Oh,
making the
okay.
point
I remember
around
that. Yeah.
and I was making a point around computational photography. And it's funny, if you come full circle now, I think that video is 4 years ago. We're kind of you mentioned earlier about like DxO and stuff having like the fake bokeh, right? Or changing your depth of field a little bit if you wanted to help separate it, or Topaz AI helping with some of the noise. And so as that gets mature, I think there is a point to where, for most people, those types of tools, in addition to the advancements that happen with Micro Four Thirds or whatever, will be sufficient. Why would you want to go spend 4,000 or $5,000 on a big heavy setup when you probably are less likely to carry it?
Yeah, definitely. I carried it, but I hated it, when I had the D750, and I had a separate bag for the 150 to 600, and then I had my back, oh my god. It was so much stuff, and I just, anyway. So that of course those are the benefits of Micro Four Thirds. Size and weight, the camera you take with you every day.
Yep.
There are also tons of features, right?
Hmm.
That you won't find anywhere else for the most part. I think some cameras have live comp or focus stacking and all the, all these other things and but it's hard to find one camera that kind of has it all like the M5 Mark II. I think to this day still uh, is an extremely capable camera and I use it, on a regular basis now.
Right.
Um,
I
save for, where I need to do video autofocus.
Yeah, I wish they would go back to that metal build. I'm one of those guys that the feel in my hands is important, which is my one of my draws to the Leica setup. And
Yeah.
they've gone to the composite bodies for a lot of reasons I understand, but to me, I would still prefer to have that fully metal chassis like the EM5 2 had, and I think the EM10 Mark II even had a metal body, and I really like the way
Yeah.
those felt in my hand.
Yeah, those and it may be a subjective choice at this point because the plastic ones actually are just as durable
Yep,
technically,
yep,
but subjectively, we want a metal camera body, some of us, right?
yep.
And you know, that EM5 Mark II is to this day is still an amazing camera in my opinion. And I had another question. Talking about your video from 4 years ago, Micro Four Thirds would kill full frame if. And you
Mhm,
mentioned that, a lot of the software these days is kind of mitigating that difference, right? With
mhm,
computational or AI and all of that. But let's put that aside and just think about the cameras themselves.
sure.
Do you feel like the performance overall is now matching just about any other camera system, or
Oh, can you guys hear me?
yeah,
Oh, there you
yeah,
are.
we're good.
Okay. Alright.
Yeah. Um, how do you feel? Because you've tested a lot of camera, not I say tested because you change cameras so often, but you've owned a lot of different cameras over the last year. Uh, how do you feel the M1 Mark III is performing relative to these other cameras?
Um, so I'll even go OM1 because I did have it for a little bit. I don't know if you know that or not. I did have it for, like, a week.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
we
yeah, for, like, a week. I think my perspective has changed a little bit. I would say, having shot, like, for example, the Leica SL2S, you know, um, from its image output standpoint, I think the differences are still there. I'll be honest. I still think there's sometimes the detail and obviously the fall off and some of that stuff I think is still there. But I think the gap is not that big, especially in the OM1, and even my EM1 Mark III. You got to kind of know how the camera will perform in certain situations. How it handles highlights, how it handles shadows versus another system. Like the SL2S, you could underexpose that thing like crazy and it would recover no problem. Where I think in the EM1 Mark III, you'd want to maybe err on the side of overexposing and it does better with highlights. So I think, obviously there's
Mhm.
differences in the systems there, or the way that the sensor technology is. But from a system perspective, I, I think they all kind of are very capable of doing a good job with small nuances. If you're just a bokeh whore, for lack of better words, then you might want to get in a medium format or micro or full frame. But from an image quality perspective, yes, I think that they're all really, really close. And the biggest thing is, I print a lot of photos. I have photos hanging all over my office here. I've had photos hanging all over my walls upstairs. I have little photo books every year, every season. I make a photo book,
Mm.
and this is one of the biggest triggers for me in terms of like coming back to Micro Four Thirds. When I print those images and I look at them on the wall, I could not tell you what system they were shot with, besides the fact that I remember what I had at the time. You couldn't look at them. I have a wall in my room that's got, I think, 16 pictures at 8 by 10 size or whatever they are, and I have on their Fuji medium format. I have Leica. I have Olympus EM10 Mark II. I've got and if you blew them up to a big size, could you tell a difference? Maybe, but for what 99% of what people are doing with these photos, and when you print them, you can't tell. And what's more important is where was I at the time? What was I doing? And a lot of times, the best pictures I have are because the camera was on me and I brought it to an event or a sporting game, or I had it on me when my kid did something or whatever, and that was more important than, oh, look at the fall off is a little bit less there, or the
Yeah.
tonality is a little
Yeah.
different here. And so I think printing is the great equalizer. I'm looking at pictures around my office right now as I talk to you, and I can tell you, like, yeah, half of these are Micro Four Thirds, and the other half are a mixture of Fuji and full frame because I had the Micro Four Thirds camera on me. So
Right. Right. That's interesting that, you know, you say printing is kind of the great equalizer. I think that's quotable.
yeah,
You should trademark that because that is true. And
let
when
me
I
see if
do
I can.
print, yeah.
Let me see if I can go over here for a second. I'll do this. I have a bunch of pictures sitting here of my kids, right? And
Hmm.
s- I got a bunch of pictures right here, and all these pictures were shot on Micro Four Thirds. And there's absolutely, this is my son when he was younger. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the image quality on any of these pictures, right?
Hmm.
In terms of detail and that kind of stuff. Like, here's my daughter when she was in cheerlead
Oops,
or in
hold on. Let me,
gymnastics.
yeah.
Look at the background of this picture I have holding up here. Would
Wow.
would the background being totally annihilated made it a better picture? I don't think so. Right?
Right.
It looks totally fine. And so I guess my point is that as I go through these, these are older pictures. My daughter would kill me if she saw me doing this on YouTube. But none of these are better or bad images because of depth of field. They're more about capturing the moment. So
Right.
it's when I do stuff like this and I look at these types of things, I'm like, why do I have $10,000 of camera gear sitting in front of me? It's silly.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone's asking, what printer do you use?
I don't print at home, so what I've used for printing most of the time is I either send them to MPix, mpix.com. They've always done a really good job for me, or sometimes
Okay.
I'll go through Adorama.
Interesting. What's like 10 8x10s cost?
Oh, I
Or
don't even
what do
know.
you
They have
typically
deals.
order?
I typically order either 8x10s or I'll order like photo books. And they ask me what
Mhm.
they cost. I don't even know. A lot of times they have like 50% off sales and stuff. I'll wait till
Oh,
those come
okay.
up and throw them in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you always gotta go on the sales, and that's when you get stuff, and,
Right.
'cause yeah, I feel like, they have to say there's a 50% discount, so they raise everything by 50%,
It's
or
artificial.
they have to raise it by 100% to knock it off 50% and charge you what they really wanna make.
Yeah. I did have a Canon, whatever their big Canon printer is,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
pretty big.
like the one I have back here,
Yeah, I
uh,
had one of those and I
P100.
printed a lot. The problem was I wasn't printing enough into I had to buy ink, and at the end of the day, when you boiled the cost down for me, how much I used it, it was just beneficial to better go to somewhere else and have it printed by a third
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, that's how I felt for a long time after I dried out my large format printer a few years ago. I said, "I'm never buying a large format printer again." It just makes more sense to take them to the
Yeah.
photo shop, the I have a local camera store that can print,
Yep.
and, and then somebody in my photo club was selling this P100 brand new in the box for like 150 bucks. So I
Wow.
said, "Well, okay." I'll take
Yeah.
it because to get a wide format printer today, it's 8, 900 or more, you know? Uh,
Something I've been toying the idea with, on the line of printing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with he's on YouTube. He's a photographer more than a YouTuber, Dan Milner. I don't know if you ever see him sometimes.
oh, yeah,
He does a
yeah.
he does a lot of journaling, right? And so
Yeah,
what I was toying the idea with is buying one of those like Canon or Fuji portable printers that print in like, I don't know what it is, 4x4 or something like that.
yeah,
And like
yeah.
for vacations, almost making like photo books with those little printed pieces or printed pictures on there, and having some journaling alongside of it. So I'm toying with that idea as kind of something I want to do
Uh,
next.
I felt the same way, but I ended up getting a little Canon, Ivy
Oh yeah.
camera.
Yep.
Yeah, that's you only get these tiny little prints, but it's more than enough for just like what you're talking about. You can scrapbook it, and then you
Yep.
got the SD card, you can get the images onto your computer. They're total crap, but, like you said, it's about capturing the moment and having fun, right? And,
Yes, it is.
so a lot of times I take that out. Recently, I've been taking that out, but okay, that's interesting. I think, uh, if
How many?
If there
How many?
was one thing I'd say that, I mean, you have it. I just feel like you have so many deal breakers because you change so much. I don't know if it's more you have a gas problem or if you have deal breaker problems, right? Because you're using it like I guess it's cost, right? You're looking at an $8,000 system or $10,000 system, and you're like, why, right?
It, it's
Is that
it's 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 FOMO mixed with logic, mixed with everything. So I mean, there's a kind of a cycle, right? Like, okay, I'm going on vacation next week for a week with my family camping. The Olympus is 110% the right camera for that for a million different reasons. But fast forward, I'm going to do some paid portrait shoots, senior portraits, probably a month later. I know that will be like I've learned myself enough now where I know I'll be like, well, I really should shoot that on an 85 1.8 on a whatever, a Canon, Sony, whatever, and I'll want to go and hurry up to that, right? And then I'll do something where I'm shooting some photos for like my son's hockey team or whatever. And so it's the different situations that come up, and then eventually I have like this I call it come to Jesus moment where I'm like, all of these cameras are capable, and so I start over, and it's a cycle. It's crazy. I less I less get wrapped up now on the new latest and greatest thing that comes out from like Tony and Chelsea Northrup or whoever else is promoting the next thing,
Mhm.
as I used to, because I know that cameras are making very incremental things, but it's more of well, if I'm going to get paid for this work, I really should shoot it with this. But if I'm going out for myself, I should do this. But if I'm shooting for myself, I really like to have a Leica. It's those different situations, and so it's been suggested to me that by a lot of people that you should just own one of everything and just stay put. You've owned everything. Why don't you just keep it and stay with one of everything? But then that goes back to the money situation that I can't feel good about having that much gear to sit on a shelf, when you've got other obligations to take care of.
Yeah, yeah, like, you said you just bought a Jeep,
I
and
did,
it's like
yeah,
I think about that too sometimes, like, I just paid off my car, and I'm like, do I really wanna spend, I don't know.
right,
It we're not financially independent or wealthy, I should say, so a
yeah,
lot of us have to think about, I'm sitting here on 10 or like, I went out, last year, late last year, guy had a Sony A1 and a 600 F4 Sony. And I didn't realize how much that cost. So I came back on a live stream and I said, "Oh, I saw a guy with an A1 and a 6. Let's look this up." And I looked it up online. It was like $20,000.
right,
And I was like, "Holy crap, 20
right.
grand."
And what's the
And you
payback
can
on that? I mean, is he selling his bird photography to National Geographic for, tens of thousands of dollars? I don't know.
yeah, yeah, and I just heard this today. The only way to make money in photography is to sell your camera.
I'm really good at that, by the way. So if you want some
Yeah.
tips, you know,
I just laugh. I said, "That's so true." But, yeah,
someone asked
so
me how many cameras
I
I
mean,
currently have.
if okay, so let's put it this way. If money were no object, what camera system would you own or would you own multiple? Still.
This might come off as I'm not trying to be arrogant with this comment, but money was no object. You're saying one camera
Mhm.
system, just one?
No, I'm just saying if money were no object, would you own one or would you own multiple? What would you do?
Yeah, I'd own multiple for sure. I would
Yeah.
probably try and go fill all the voids. I would probably keep Micro Four Thirds as like my day in day out, kind of travel photography camera because of its size and its features and portability. I'd for sure have something like a Sony A1 or a Canon R3 for those moments where I need it, which I don't really need it. And I would have a Leica M11 or something like that,
Mhm.
with a 35 1.4 or whatever. And I'd do that. But that creates another problem because you go on vacation. What do you take? You're gonna grab them all? I mean, eventually at some point on that vacation, I might want to have the Leica. So I think you really kind of have to. Now that I've been around the world 10 times with the camera stuff, you kind of know what you're missing out on and what you're not missing out on, how important those features are, and that's why I keep coming back to the portability and capturing the moments, and whatever system allows you to do that the
Mm.
best is probably. Another part of it too is if you're afraid to break or damage your camera and you don't bring it with you, I think that's part of it too. I mean, I know a lot of people that have Leica
Mm.
M cameras, and they're known for knocking the rangefinder patch out of alignment, or they're so expensive or whatever, or they're not weather sealed. And they won't take them in these situations. But I think you come to
Yeah.
appreciate your camera more if you're like, well, I know my Olympus camera can get rained on, and I bought this for $700, which is that's obviously not nothing, but it's not $4,000. So if this thing were to fall off a bridge tomorrow and I lost it, I wouldn't be as heartbroken as I would by losing a $9,000 Leica. And I think that
Right.
plays some part of the mentality as well, is that I don't care if this thing gets beat up or dented up, or if it, if it gets wet, because it's what it is.
Yeah. Well, you've experienced that actually when you're in Vegas, right? Somebody stole your EM10.
They
How did that
stole a EM10 ZV1. Yeah.
I mean, how did that feel? I mean, I was it the cameras or your laptop? Or was it just kind of the
Um,
experience itself was bad?
so that's a great point. So the fact that it was a EM10 Mark II that I had bought off of eBay or whatever it was for like $200, it was super cheap. Made it, I wasn't so upset that the camera got stolen. I was more upset someone broke into my room in the hotel in Vegas and stole all my stuff than anything else. If
Yeah.
that were to be my Leica M10 at the time or something like that, yeah, that would be even worse. Now I do or did have my Leica M10 on my homeowner's insurance. So if I broke it, that, obviously I could file a claim. But yeah, imagine having a Sony A1, with a 600 f4, and someone steals that $20,000 setup. You got to have insurance, and if you don't, you'd be sick to your stomach.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's part of the reason I don't take my OM1 out as much for, like, my personal stuff because that would hurt if that got broken or stolen.
Hmm.
So when I take out my EM5 Mark II, in the back of my mind, I'm like, "I can replace this tomorrow for, like, $300."
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and the images are perfectly fine, you know, uh, 'cause a lot of people ask, the most common question is, "What should I upgrade to?" Right?
Hmm.
And you've upgraded over and over again, but like you said, the image quality, there's not that much difference between all camera systems, and then printing is kind of the equalizer, as you said.
Hmm.
And I think that's, one of the things with Micro Four Thirds. It is the camera you'll take everywhere, and it does everything, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. You asked about upgrading. If you're starting out brand new, I think you got to think about the ecosystem, right? And I think there's
Mhm.
rumors that we're going to see a G9 Mark II. So I don't, there's OM1, which is capable. The Olympus or Micro Four Thirds system is fully fleshed out in terms of lenses. Really, I mean, I don't know what gaps exist, but there's not many. And so you could buy into the system now and be good for a long time. And I can say that about Sony and others as well. But it's not like the gear is going to stop making good images, that kind of stuff. So I don't think you can make a wrong choice these days, honestly.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Like I said, it's about the ecosystem and what you can buy a camera very subjectively, I think, at this point without worrying about the technical specs so much, right?
Hmm.
Just pick the camera that feels best in your hands, or do you like the way it looks and feels? Uh, the technical specs, I think, are less relevant now on the front end and also on the back end for processing because software is kind of mitigating a lot of the differences that you might get with a larger system.
Yeah, I just,
Um,
I think the biggest thing you got to watch out for is, OM systems. I think they're kind of rebranding. Maybe you disagree with this, but they're kind of rebranding their image as like the wildlife, nature, hiking type of setup, and they've stopped promoting their gear as like um, how they were in the past. I kind of more the portraits and that kind of stuff, even though they're obviously very capable for that. And so I think they've kind of realized that they want to carve out a niche and go after that. I think
yeah,
the only thing is, YouTube and the people that talk positively or negatively about Micro Four Thirds or don't talk about it at all, obviously have an impact on new buyers. And so I hope that there's enough people that understand the strengths and kind of can keep it going, because I think Olympus makes some of the best cameras out there. Period. Full stop in terms
yeah,
of build quality and features and size and all the stuff you get with it and value.
absolutely. I mean, and especially on the used market, they're just selling for next to nothing. The Mark II series. Anyway, you can get an EM1 Mark II, 400 or $500. EM5 Mark II for 300, EM10 Mark II for 200. I'm using the
Yeah.
EM10 Mark II right now, actually, for this streaming, and that's what I have been using for many years now.
Wow.
So yeah, and that's because I busted the battery door and it still works, but
Right.
it's not much use in the field anymore.
Yeah, and nobody would have noticed. No, I mean, maybe because it's a live stream, but I couldn't have told you what camera you're shooting that on. I have no idea.
Right, right. Okay, Eric, what I'd like to do, if you have time, because I know you have a family and everything going on a Saturday. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but what I like to do is maybe open up the chat section to questions, maybe that
Sure.
they might have for you. Uh, and so I'll talk to you a little bit while the questions come in, if any, and then we can go from there.
Somebody
Uh,
did ask how many cameras I own currently, and you're catching me on a low point. So two digital cameras. Well, really one. One is being delivered probably right now. It's probably at the front door.
mhm.
And then I have two film cameras. I have an AE1 that my dad had when he was taking pictures of me as a baby that he gave to me. I refurbished it, so I'm not going to sell that. It's kind of an heirloom. And then I
Right.
have a little Olympus. Let me see if I got it right here. Olympus stylus film point and shoot that I throw film in. This thing's awesome. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
two digital, two analog. That's it
That is
right now.
shockingly low. I was shocked when you sold off your original S5. I don't know if you got the S5 II in your hands ever, but
I
uh,
have,
yeah.
I
Did you
have,
actually
I
buy it or did you just try it?
no, I just tried it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just know I'm going down that path again of like, okay, an S5 Mark II with the better autofocus is great. You put the 20 to 60 kit lens on there. It's a good kit lens. And right now they had a promotion. This is what caused gas. They have a promotion where they give you the 51.8 for free, or it's like $5 more. So, it's a pretty
Yeah.
good setup right there. But then it's like, where do I go from there? And is
Yeah.
it really, I don't know. It wasn't worth it.
Yeah, and
It's
it's a big camera. And with the 51.8, it's a big lens for what it is on the Panasonic, but
yeah.
uh, I can't let go of it now, partially because, and I hardly use it. I bought it originally for
Oh, you have
video.
one. You have
Well,
one.
I have an S5, not the Mark II.
Okay.
Uh, but I saw you get rid of all that stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's such a beautiful images out of that camera."
I
And
know.
then you and then you got the Leica SL a couple of times, and I'm like, "All right, now you're back in the L mount system. That's cool."
Mm-mm.
And then you got rid of that, and I'm like, "What the hell?"
Well, like the Leica SL, the S5 for me, the body's okay. I didn't like the viewfinder. It's okay, right? I just felt like
Mm,
I wanted something else. It was just a gas move. The SL2S is an awesome camera if you don't need continuous autofocus. But look from an aesthetics, like the feel in your hand, it's a big brick. It's heavy. Again, not lightweight. And looking through the OVF, it's one of the best, if not the best OVF I've ever looked through.
mm,
And so that's an awesome little camera. But it goes back to everything goes back to I didn't carry it that much because it was big and heavy. And then when I would
yeah.
go to shoot like my kids' sports, it didn't track worth anything. So, it was kind of more of a stills, slow moving, maybe portrait type of camera. And if I wanted to make it small, I had to throw my M mount glass on it adapted, and then you're back to manual
Mm,
focus. It just didn't make sense to me. So yeah.
okay. Here's a quick question. Talking about limits, have you used any of the older digicams like an Ali XZ1?
I absolutely have owned one of those, and I liked it because I think it's a CCD sensor. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I am one of those people that thinks the older CCD sensors, or even some of the older like Nikon CMOS sensors, had a better color rendition to them than some of the newer stuff. Grabbing like a Nikon D700, right? That's a CMOS sensor, or getting some of those old CCD sensors that Kodak made. I think those sensors have awesome colors. Obviously, they're terrible at high ISO. If you overexpose or underexpose them, they don't recover as well. But if you get it
Mhm.
right, I think those are cool. So the Olympus XZ1, I think that's the one that has a little point and shoot CCD sensor in it. I like that camera a lot.
Okay. Do you think the point and shoot market's ever going to come back, or is it always going to be kind of like this nostalgia niche thing?
No, no, that's another separate topic, right? But I think iPhones and Pixels have gotten so good for 95% of people that those point and shoot cameras are kind of out, unless, it's something like a Ricoh GR or a Fuji X100, or if Olympus ever made something like a Pen F2, and fixed lens type stuff. I think those are technically point and shoots. I think those always have a place because I think those are, again, back to being form factor. They carry with you a lot. And I think a lot of people love those. But true
Hmm.
point and shoots, like a little Canon with a 24 to 100 equivalent lens on a 1 inch sensor, I think those are done.
Oh, even the 1 inchers, huh? Wow.
I
How
think
about
1 inch.
yeah, you don't like the 1 inch sensor cameras
I, I just
or
don't. I just don't know from a photography standpoint. I mean, maybe for like if you're doing far long range birding stuff, they have some of those bridge cameras. Maybe, I don't know.
maybe? Yeah. So if you were to recommend like somebody that never owned a camera before, and you
Hardest
know that
question
their
ever.
skill set is just going to be anyway, what would you recommend to somebody thinking about getting into photography right now as a starter camera?
I mean, it's going to come down to a lot of things. What do you want to shoot and what's your price point? But obviously, I don't know if we know those things or not. Starter camera. I would take my experience of saying that you might buy the best camera that's big, and I think you'll after the novelty wears off, it'll sit on your shelf most of the time. If it's just somebody like that's like me, like a family man or whatever, that's gonna take pictures for fun. I would probably point into something small and capable. So I would say if you're something like an Olympus EM5 or OM5 series, I think that gives you a lot of room to grow, and it's
Mhm.
still very capable and it's small and compact. So I think it fills those needs. If you were to look at something like Fuji, I'd probably do something like if they come out with a new XE series, um, maybe XS20. I don't know, maybe, but I would focus that answer around many things, but the crux of it would be, what are you going to carry with you, right? And
Yeah.
because I really think that people buy these. How many times have you seen people buy DSLRs because they went to Best Buy and it was recommended by the salesperson there, and they
Yeah.
go all gung ho on a vacation, and then that DSLR never leaves the shelf again because it's like it's too big. It's a pain in the butt to do it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If the 300 millimeter f4 lens did not exist, right?
Mm.
Let's say we remove that off the map. How would you feel about the Micro Four Thirds system as for you at this point?
Um, I okay. Honest answer to that. I mean, man, you put me on the spot on this. The OM1, the OM1 is like I thought was like the step they needed in terms of not just like redesigning menu systems and stuff, but autofocus and its capabilities.
Right.
I made a video that got a lot of flack because I ended up buying one on the OM5 was a big disappointment. I don't know if you remember seeing that. I was kind of,
Yeah, yeah, I
I don't know
remember that
why.
one.
I'm not emotionally attached to cameras, but I was kind of pissed at the way they did the OM5 announcement because it looked like to me a half-baked effort to like take an EM1 Mark III, put it in an EM5 3 body, and throw it out the door. They didn't even update the USB-C charging or any of that kind of stuff. And I was like, what are they doing? Because in my opinion, that camera for Olympus could have been a major hit if they would have come out and done something that was more premium, had more
Yeah.
thought to it, and because I think that's the right camera for a lot of people is that era. And so I was concerned, obviously, about how Olympus is going to do moving forward. Now we have the Panasonic G9 II maybe coming out. If Panasonic takes whatever they're going to do there and puts it into something like a GX9 or whatever, I think those cameras are kind of the sweet spot for a lot of people, given what most people do with their cameras. Now, if you're in professional shooting, then obviously the OM1. If you're talking Olympus, XH2S or XH2 for Fuji, or any of the A bodies or whatever it is for Sony.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, kind of back to like if the 300 millimeter f4 did not exist,
Hmm. How do I feel about it?
yeah, how would you feel about Micro Four Thirds system without it? Would you still
I
stay
would
in the system for
say,
all the reasons you talked about, or
yeah, there's a lot of things I've come to appreciate. I think it takes time for people to appreciate those things. But I mean, back to my point, the system is baked out enough where you're not going to be looking for a lens that it doesn't have. And I think to your point
mm,
earlier, there's a ton of incredible value on the used market or even new. I bought this for $700
Yeah.
refurbished, from
Yeah.
Olympus itself or OM Systems itself. And I think it's really hard to find value like that, something you can grow with and make good images with at that price point anywhere else. I think the closest thing to that right now is probably Nikon with that Z5, right? I mean, I think they have a really compelling offering or argument there. But
Mhm.
to answer your question about Micro Four Thirds, I think I could still recommend them even without the 300 f4, with the caveat being I want them to keep innovating. They need to release a Pen F2, a premium Pen F2
Oh,
to go take on the
yes.
X100V. What everybody that ever shot Olympus knows that's the camera they want. What are they doing? They need to make that camera.
Right. Right. So what are you gonna do? You never bought the regular Pen F, did you?
I've had it twice. I had a silver one and a black one. I
You're
loved it.
kidding.
Nope, I loved it.
Wow.
I love it.
Wow, I don't but yeah, do you have any videos on that? I don't think I've seen it.
I don't know if I do or not. In fact, hold on a second. That gymnastics picture, where is it that I showed you? All of those are shot on a Pen F. Yeah, like a bunch
Wow.
of these pictures are all shot on a Pen F. This is a Pen F picture right here.
Yeah.
I think a 45-1.8
Awesome.
and I had a 17-1.8. So
Yeah, that
cool camera.
yeah, it's definitely my camera of choice when I go out. Like I said,
Yeah.
recently I've been doing more of the M1 Mark II or EM5 Mark II, but the Pen F, it's always that's like my everyday camera, and I have 2 of them. I bought one for
Mhm.
parts. Just in case the one I have breaks down, I'll have another one because I got it like you
Smart.
on the refurb site for like $600.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Psh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So whenever, that sale comes on the refurb site for Olympus, I always look for the Pen F because 'cause I'm like, I can't have enough of those.
Yeah.
That's a camera that I'll never, and I bought that camera about a month after I bought the EM10 Mark II because
Mhm.
I found the Micro Four Thirds system did everything I needed to do,
Yeah.
and I was shooting D750 at the time. I mean, I was, like, all in on full frame, and after I had the EM10 because they had the Pen F on the shelf, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, "Man, that's like 11 or 1,200 bucks. I ain't dropping that on a camera system I've never seen before, right?"
Right.
And they had the EM10 Mark II 2-lens kit for, like, 599 at the time. So I was like, "Well, I can get 2 lenses and a small camera. This'll do." And then within a year, I completely converted my full frame system. I didn't sell it, but I converted over to using Micro Four Thirds professionally for my real estate and commercial photography. I
Wow.
just needed that 7 to
You know,
14.
the Pen F, that didn't have a headphone or a microphone jack, does it? I don't think so.
No.
So I think at the time I was like, I loved that camera, but I was in the mindset of like, well, I need this camera to also be able to take video of me, which is one of the things I like about the EM1 Mark III, EM5 series. And it had the flip screen, it had IBIS in it, but it was contrast autofocus and it had no mic input. And I think that's why I ultimately parted with it, which
Mhm.
those are one of those cameras I just wish I would have kept and put on the shelf, right? It's one of the cameras I wish I wouldn't have sold. Somebody put in the chat, I see, I'll challenge you, your Pen F with the Penny GX9 any day. The GX9, I do think that GX series, the GX9 in particular, was probably the best iteration of it. It's a good camera. You got a
Yeah.
similar challenge there where if you're going to do it for video of vlogging or talking to yourself, that's probably not it. But
Yeah, Lauren's been a viewer for a long time on my channel. We exchange email back and forth about gear all the time, yeah, he
so
hasn't got a pen. Yeah. I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
so you do talk gear just behind the curtains a little bit, huh? You see a little bit of gas sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, we talk about gear, behind the scenes, and he loves his, like, Canon RP with the 50, because he does mostly street, so he
Okay.
likes the 35 from Canon. So he shoots that a lot, and he recently got the 25-1.8 for the Olympus.
Mm.
Uh, I think he shoots a Pen PL8, if I recall.
Oh yeah. I've never shot those little pen cameras. I've been super interested in them, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the pen cameras don't have the two scroll wheels. It's just one. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's just one.
And
Yeah.
I when you get me too far away from accessing the exposure triangle easily, I don't like that. So I never went for one of those. But that's kind of what the GX85 that it's coming. has the 2 kit lens system, and then I have the 15 1.7
Mhm.
Leica lens coming. That 15 Leica lens or Pana Leica lens with that setup is great. The aperture ring works. And so I think that's a cool little like cheap M system, like M system type camera, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, and it does great. The only thing I compared like the Pen F with the GX85 in some video. I think I had my Fuji X-T30 all at the same time. So I was carrying 4 cameras, right? The 3 I was comparing plus my vlogging camera.
Right.
Uh,
Wow. So
but anyway, the
why
only
did
thing I
you?
noticed what's that?
I was going to ask you. So why you've dabbled in Fuji? I've heard that. I've heard you dabble in the Lumix L mount. You've dabbled around too. Like, what can I ask you? Like, what your interest is in those other cameras? Is just kind of exploring what else is out there, or what? Why do you have those?
Yeah, yeah, okay. So let me start with the I guess I'll start with the Fuji because that's probably the first one I bought. I was just curious about the film simulations,
Okay.
and I had gas. Uh, so you could put those 2 things together, and the only lens I've bought for it came with the kit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only lens I bought for that is the 35 f2, and it
Mm-hmm.
was the cheap plastic one for 200
Oh,
bucks.
the
I mean, like I
XC.
said, it's
Yeah.
so, but it's been sitting on the shelf. It's like brand new. Once that film simulation kind of thing wore off, uh, because, you
Yeah.
can kinda do that in post, pretty much. That wore off
Exactly.
really fast. So I didn't like the dials, I felt like you dial in shutter speed and aperture, and now 2 dials on your camera are useless. Like,
Mm-hmm.
'cause if you wanna shoot aperture priority, then you don't need the shutter dial, but there's one there, right?
Mm.
I don't know,
Okay.
it's hard for me to explain. And the 2 tiny thumb dials, supplement that, but then they're tiny plastic. It just didn't have that feel, right? For me. I like the bigger dials on the Olympus.
I can't do it because I'm recording on it, but you're right. There's those dials are always metal and like have a knurled, and the tactile feedback on those dials are really good on the Olympus cameras.
Yeah, yeah, so that was a big turnoff for me. It wasn't a deal breaker, but it was a turnoff to operate the camera with those tiny dials. So the Fuji was a gas, i.e., curiosity about the film simulations. And, the Leica L mount, the Panasonic S5, was for my work, because I had
Mhm.
just gotten, like, 5 video jobs, like, inside of 4 weeks, and the EM1 Mark III was not cutting it, for video because I have to deal with a lot of dynamic range,
How dare you?
um, a lot of shadow area because, you have dark furniture and bright windows, right, in an
Mm,
office. So I
mhm.
had like 5 video jobs. I did a laundromat, a couple of laundry. So I was like, okay, I got to get the Panasonic S5 because then I can shoot and log internally. I got the full frame goodness, 422 10-bit, all of that stuff. And I didn't care about autofocus because I'm always on a gimbal and manually focusing.
Got it.
So I bought it, and then I didn't get another video job for like 6 months. Like COVID kicked in or something. Uh, but I could never sell it because the few times I took it out for photography and I ended up buying the 51.8 for it.
Mhm.
The images out of it are amazing. I mean,
Yep.
very, very clean. I mean, hands down, you'll always get a better quality image out of a full frame camera system than you will a Micro Four Thirds. It's just
Right.
I've not found the different, to find I've not been able to disprove that, right? Now, ultimately, like you said, printing is the great equalizer. Even when you export things for Instagram and stuff, that's when you really can't see any difference.
Right.
Right? When you actually deliver the images, you can't tell any difference between full frame and Micro Four Thirds. And high ISO is being mitigated quite a bit. So that's why I got into the Panasonic, but that's why I bought it, and I still have it to this day because what can I get for it on trade? Like 600 bucks now,
Oh,
So
yeah,
it's not.
definitely worth holding on to. Have you shot your EM1 Mark III? So my last video, the one I just put up with the TT Artisans 25 f2
Mhm.
I put up yesterday night, that was shot on this EM1 Mark III in log, and then I graded it in DaVinci, using the Panasonic V-Log LUT, actually, and I feel like
Mm.
I'm getting colors that I like there. Um,
Mhm.
I've been playing around a little bit. It was the SL2S that I had that I was like, "Man, this is gonna surprise some people." Leica colors out of camera, they're terrible, actually.
Wow,
Besides
that
maybe
is
some black, but
surprising.
they're not good. And if you go from the different M cameras, like the M9 versus the M10 versus the M240, they're different. And so I found myself, editing photos in RAW, but shooting the video for the Leica SL2S in log because I wanted to get to an output that I like. Now, on the flip side, their log footage is super gradable, and you can make it look awesome. And it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like a cinema camera inside there. But you know, uh, that whole thing got me grading with log, and so I put OM log on this yesterday, and I shot that video in it, and then I just graded quickly with a Panasonic Vlog LUT. And I thought the colors came out pretty good. I liked them.
Yeah, that workflow I'm still trying to get down myself. I ended up not using the LUTs from OM Systems for my work,
Correct.
and just adding contrast and saturation myself. Uh, so I shoot an OM log 400, but then
Mhm.
I do some minor grading myself in post because applying the OM log LUT from Olympus, it's a little tricky. You have to get the color management right in DaVinci, and
Yeah,
I
if you
haven't.
ever do it again, take the Vlog. It'll be oversaturated, and just take the saturation and take the contrast back a little bit, and you end up
Hmm.
with skin tones and stuff that look really pleasing. I think, in my opinion, anyways. It's my opinion, but
Interesting. I have to try that. Just desaturate the LUT.
oh yeah, when
Okay.
you if you use DaVinci. Now we're off
Yeah.
topic
Yeah.
totally. You use DaVinci. There's two
Yeah.
tabs in the color wheel that let you do like saturation, contrast,
Right.
highlights, and shadows. And so I think I just take contrast back a little bit, saturation back a little bit. I increase the shadows and decrease the highlights to kind of bring that. And then that's those four changes, and I just apply it all, and you're done.
Oh, nice. I'll have to try that. I don't shoot people very often, so skin tones is kind of irrelevant. But I have to try it. That's an interesting one because you always think about you have a log file, you want to saturate it and add contrast, but you're
Hmm.
applying a LUT, then doing the opposite.
Yeah, the LUTs are
You're
too
not even
heavy-handed.
using the Olympus LUT. Interesting.
Right. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Um,
Any more
uh,
questions come rolling in? I didn't see
no, I
any.
didn't see any questions roll in, so I think this may be a good time to wrap it up for everyone. Uh, any last words for the audience, and what do you have coming up next on your channel?
Um, Yeah, so well, for my channel, I'll tackle that first. And we talked before we actually went live. I'm not really interested in being a YouTuber per se. I'm not really trying to make a living on this. I these gas things. I got accused once of doing all this just for views. Newsflash: I only have 4,500 subscribers. It's not
Yeah.
working. So no, this is really the insanity that lives in my brain. And so what I want to do versus what I'll do. What I want to do is I want to make more content around just kind of going out and shooting in different, different scenarios and talking about maybe some of the settings or lenses or whatever. But what I don't want to do is become just a gear reviewer. I want to kind of move away from that a little bit if I can. And I don't know about how you feel about this, but I know this is kind of how it feeds the algorithm. I don't want to be the, if your photos are blurry, try this, or these 5 tips. And I would like to kind of just be more authentic, and I know that might stunt some of the growth on the channel, but that's not what I've ever really been about in the first
Yeah.
place. So I think I want to do more of kind of on scene. I'm out shooting wildlife, or like I said, I'm going up north. There's some photos that I've taken. I want to redo and talk about what I did wrong and what I've learned from 3 years ago versus now, and fix those. So that's part of the GX85. So you'll see some of that come up where I'm going to try and make a 3 liter kit because again, back to
Mhm.
size. The kit I want to
Yeah.
bring up camping is only going to fit in a 3 liter sling because I don't want to bring a big backpack full of gear. Back to your comment about the D750 days, going and shooting some of these waterfalls that I took in the past that I screwed up where I overexposed something or I didn't have a
Right.
long enough shutter. So those types of videos are what I want to make next. And I would like to not switch camera gear. I say that, but it's been 3 years of, hey, what's the best
Yeah.
vlogging camera? To became a game on Fred Miranda of can I buy something cheap, use it for 2 weeks, then sell it on eBay for a little bit of profit? I got in that game for a long time. And it's almost like I
Ah,
conditioned my brain to look for deals, buy something, use it, and then flip it. And I think that's how I ended up with all this different stuff. That's what I was doing. I wanted to try everything.
right, right. Because I remember you had a video out like, this is gonna be my one camera for a year.
It was the
That
EM1 Mark
lasted
III
what?
2 times ago.
I was like,
Uh,
boy, that didn't last long.
Do you remember I
I
broke
mean,
it? I don't know if you saw my channel, but I took it to the airport and I was recording a video on it and I dropped it and broke it.
oh, no, I didn't see that one.
And when I
Wow.
sent it out for repair, I came back, they put the rear screen back on and snapped the rear screen off. And, it used to, like, if it was you'd open it and then you'd flip it, it would be
Yeah.
like maybe a top to bottom flip. Well, then when they put it on, the hinge was backwards. It was like bottom to top, and I didn't like that. It drove me nuts, and that's literally why I sold that camera.
I know. Well, I know somebody that didn't like the way the memory card on the M5 Mark II went in backwards.
Wow.
Deal breaker. You just
Yeah.
never know.
That sounds insurmountable, I get it.
Yeah, but I think that's a great direction for your channel, and that's who you are, right? As I always tell people, you do you, right?
Right.
And to some extent, I think for me at least, I think it's a great excuse to get outdoors, and
Mhm.
it also makes what I'm doing more enjoyable and being able to share that with people. When
Yeah.
I haven't done a vlog in a while, but uh, when I was vlogging more often, that was definitely part of it. It was like, oh, look what happened today, and I can share this with my viewers and hopefully inspire some people to get out and shoot with their gear. That's I
Well,
think that's the most important thing.
we've talked before the live stream started. The photography genre is dying kind of as a topic, I think, on YouTube a little bit. I would say dying, but it's definitely niched out. And,
Mhm.
I don't think people really care about me, right, so much, to think that would be kind of egotistic. And so you're kinda
Right.
left to like, well, am I trying to grow this channel? Am I trying to do gear reviews? And if so, then you've got so many other ones that are so much better. Like you've got people like Gerald Undone and stuff that do a tremendous job at talking through this stuff, or you got Jordan Drake and Chris Nichols on Petapixel now. Like, am I gonna compete with those guys? I don't think so. And so I
Yeah.
think you gotta just
Or
kinda carve out.
let me just mention Camera Conspiracies. It's so bad it's good.
Oh, yeah, he's funny though. He's got comedy. It's like a Photo Trippers. I don't know if you watch those guys or
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
Gavin Hardcastle. He's at least the show's funny, right? So I think you've got to
Right.
carve out your niche and just do you. And so if I move away from gas and it's more about what I'm doing, we'll see how that goes. I think the views might drop quite a bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. No big deal. But that's awesome. That's great to hear. So, I have links down below to Eric's channel. I
Thank you.
recommend you watch his most recent not well, his last 2, right? He did one on the lens, the 25 millimeter f2, which is a great lens.
Hmm.
And then also about, his anxiety, or I don't know how to word it, about Micro Four Thirds.
Yeah,
Uh,
that video was a second part. The video before that was like I said, Micro Four Thirds is the best at these few things. I talked about
right.
or the wildlife, and I talked about macro. And so that video where I addressed the three concerns was like a part two to that. And I don't think the viewers got that. I didn't do a good job of probably making that obvious.
Um, I got it. I got it. And that really plays to what Olympus is trying to push, or trying to identify as, right? The wildlife sports camera.
Hmm.
But anyhow, that's all I have for today. I'm so glad I got a chance to get you on. Maybe we can have you on again if you're still in Micro Four Thirds or not. It doesn't really matter. I'm not a Micro Four Thirds snob, so to speak. I like all the camera systems for all the different reasons as you have. And
Right.
that's why I wanted to have you on is we have this small window potentially that you're in Micro Four Thirds,
Hmm.
and it's a great opportunity to talk to because my audience is primarily Micro Four Thirds. It'd be a great opportunity to talk to the audience and introduce you as well, because there's probably a lot of people never heard of you, right?
Yeah.
Um, that
If you want me to give some parting words, don't fall victim to the gas. Don't fall victim to the FOMO. It's a very, very capable and fun system. And that's why I
Mhm.
keep returning to it. So I'm enjoying it for now.
Awesome. All right, Eric. Thanks so much for coming in today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll be watching you on your channel.
All right. Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you.
All right, and
All right.
I'll just say last few words. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming in, and I hope you enjoyed watching Eric talk live. This was actually his first live stream, and he was using the EM1 Mark III with the webcam software to get through this. So kudos for him to be able to get through this on his first try. Unlike I've been doing this for years and I still can't get it right sometimes. So thank you so much again for being here with us. And I hope to see you all guys again soon.